Hey guys, so let's start the project off, your build video. Okay, so in this picture you're going to see we just have the chassis set up. We have the front end on. That's pretty self-explanatory. Just going to bolt your regular front end on and just drop your '03 rear end parts on too. And just for the video's sake, we have the shock mount installed there too. Okay, so the next part of the build that you're going to see is you're going to build the links. Okay, this is a very important part of your build. Um, you want to get these perfectly equal, left and right, and you also want to get the dimensions correct too. So for your side links, I'd recommend starting at 29 millimeters from center of the hole to center of the hole. And with these, generally, everybody you're gonna have to play with them a little bit to get that pod movement free. So basically, you're gonna install them, you're gonna shim them correctly, then you're gonna, without any of the suspension connected, you're just gonna play with it and move it back and forth and adjust. And with those small links, you're gonna want what is it? 18.5 millimeters. Okay. Um, Next part, we're just gonna install our male ends for the shocks. So as you can see, screw them in onto your thing. There's going to be two holes on your shock brace, a closer one and a farther away one. For the PM ones, you're going to want to use the holes that are closer to each other, the inside holes, not the outside holes. I just left that if somebody has a longer shock and they want to use a longer uh, pieces, then they can, and it won't be restricted. And you're going to want to shim these. You're going to want a very small outer diameter M2 shim, so it's going to be 3 millimeters on the outer diameter, 2 millimeters on the inner diameter, and that's just so that the shock end can move freely. So here's just a side view, so you can see that it's shimming and how it's done. Actually, wait, no. With these ones, I think you can use the standard M2 shims, which have a 4 millimeter outer diameter and a 2 millimeter inner diameter. So, I'd have those extra thin 3 millimeter outer diameter shims ready. I think in the links I put I I think I put some PN motor shimming shims, excuse me, armature shims. Those will work well. Those are those 3 millimeter outer diameter. They're a little soft, but it doesn't have to be. Actually, it's better if they're soft because that way it gives you even more movement, less restriction. You can also use some Slick 7 uh, Kyosho Mini-Z F1. I think it's a bearing shim. It's a brass shim about 0.7 millimeters tall. That's what I'm using for this build. I looked on the internet, couldn't really find any. I don't think they make them anymore. But yeah, any shim with a 3 millimeter outer diameter, 2 millimeter inner diameter will work. I have the PM ones up on the parts list, so refer back to that when you're beginning your build. Okay. Um, okay, so the next step is we're just going to install our standoff braces. Here you see. Okay, so yeah, just install those, screw from the top. I suggest using a flathead. I didn't countersink that area. It's not really necessary if you use a flathead. Um, yeah, those are some M2 brass uh, standoffs, and any M2 shim, excuse me, M2 screw will work. Uh, and there you go. It creates a really rigid support. So there. Okay. The next part of your build will be your rear pod shock mount. Okay, so here we go. Basically, you just install your female shock ends from the bottom. Any M2 screw will work, and no shimming is required in this area. Now, you may want to leave a little bit of play, not a lot. Just don't over tighten these. Okay, so uh, maybe 0.1 millimeter of play, not even, just so that there's no binding. So just be careful. If you tighten these down too hard, they will bind and not give you the amount of free play slash movement you will need. So there you have it. I have gone through all of these. There was a mistake. I don't know if it was on my fault or Shapeways. I think it was Shapeways because half the parts I got were correct and half not. Basically, the screw holes were way too large. Yeah, I don't know what went wrong. Maybe their tolerances were off. I don't know. But I had to go back, epoxy slash glue, all the holes completely shut, and re-drill everything. Now, those of you who pre-ordered, I did this for you, and I'm really sorry that I had to go back and do this, and it looks so the way it does because it did require sanding and gluing to make everything look not look nice, but be even, and it doesn't look nice. So for those of you do uh, who did pre-order, I will be doing probably this piece in aluminum sometime in the future when I can get a quote. I'm shopping around. I have a bead on a pretty decent price, and if there's enough want for it, I will do that. And then for those of you who did pre-order, I will offer that piece at cost. So that's just because I feel really bad that it didn't look perfect. It's completely functional, so don't worry. So this is just mounting it to your rear pod. So pretty straightforward. Okay. All right, just another shot of that. Like I said, pretty straightforward. As you can see, this is one of the extremes uh, uh in terms of how bad the quality came out and how much work I had to do, which is why it looks so nasty because I did have to glue a lot and sand a lot, and I just took the worst one and put it on my chassis because I wanted to get the nicest stuff out to you guys. So there you have it. Also, heads up on your rear pod. You're gonna want your axle carriers with the +2 sign facing towards the rear. Originally, I wanted to do 100 to 94 millimeter wheelbase, but I don't really see a use for 100 millimeters, and I just thought, you move that weight a little closer in with that +2 facing out. So instead, you have the farthest back holes +2 gives you 98, and the 0 facing backwards will give you 96, and then the +2 facing backwards in the closest holes will give you 94, and so on and so forth. So here you just see the side view where you're going to put your M2 by 10 millimeter screw, which is included with your kit, as it are those brass standoffs. I include those in the kit, and you just put your M2 nut, and this is a smaller nut than the standard wheel nut. Those are 4 millimeter outer diameter as opposed to 4.5. So excuse me, it's not a diameter. It's not a circle. It's a 4 millimeter hex. Okay, that's what it is. 4 millimeter hex. Okay, so I suggest using those. If you don't have those, I suppose you could just shim. Uh, but I like that when you put that nut down there, it creates a really sturdy base, and that is a 1.5 millimeter tall. So if you're just going to do shims, you're going to need a lot. 1.5 millimeters worth of shims right there. And then on top of that, you also need some of those smaller outer diameter nut shims again. Those 3 millimeter outer diameter M2 shims. You're going to need those again, and you're going to put that right on top of that nut because with those 4 millimeter shims, basically it restricts the pod's movement more than you would think actually. So it's pretty important, I'd say, to do that. Alrighty then. Just wait for the next slide to come on. Oh, also, while I'm on the subject, I found that you want to have your rear links, the rear part of your links, so where your side links connect to the rear pod, you want to have them sit a little higher up in the front. This is for two reasons. Basically, your roll center on your rear pod is directly dependent upon your side links and their geometry. And I will include a little write-up about that. I've been researching it, and I still need to do a little more research, as I'm not 100% certain on how you would adjust that. Well, no, I know how you adjust that. I just don't know what adjustments will do what. Basically, I do know that the way you shim and the disparity between the front and the main chassis linkage and the back part on the pod linkage, that will change your roll center. Because think about it, your rear pod is pivoting upon your pivot ball, okay, but it's not rolling on that axis. Because those rear links really do control that movement, and that roll center. So, and a lot of people think that this roll center at the rear is like a set and forget kind of setting, but it really is not. It's really something you have to play with, and there's no one way to say that, yeah, the higher rear roll center is going to give you more steering, or less steering, or more grip or less grip. It's really kind of you have to try it out and then play with it and keep testing till you find the perfect balance for your situation. Can't stress that enough. That's a very important aspect, especially since the higher your rear roll center, uh, in accordance with your front roll center, the more weight transfer you will have to the front. So basically, you think about your roll axis, which is like you draw a line from your rear roll center to your front roll center. And basically, the angle of that line will determine the amount of chassis roll. Okay, so quickly here, just before I get into that, you just see, yeah, you need one of those thin shims on top of two of those M2 by 0.2 millimeter shims. Okay, so back to what I was saying. Oh, you also need one of those M2 by with an outer diameter of 3 millimeters on the top and bottom of your rear pivot ball, and then you will also want to shim underneath your pivot ball block the same amount as one of those shims. So in my instance, I used 0.7 millimeters. So I would put 0.7 on top of the ball, underneath the ball, and then I put 0.7 millimeters under each screw of my rear pivot. And you will all under each screw of my rear pivot brace where it mounts to the central chassis. And you'll also notice that you have two holes up here for a grub screw to adjust your tweak. So just going back to that, you see where you put that other screw and you put that long screw. You need probably for your rear chassis, for the rear pod, you probably need those M2 by 10s to mount your side links, but you don't need them at the front. You can probably get away with M2 by 8s, which I didn't include because I didn't have any on hand. But or even maybe even an M2 by 6. I'm not sure about that, but you probably could get away with that. But you need one of those M2 by 4s for M2 by 10s for your rear pivot. Okay, so back to the roll center and the roll axis. Basically, when you lower your front roll center, raise your rear roll center, you're going to get more uh, uh, chassis weight transfer to the front of the car. Okay, and vice versa. If you raise your front roll center in accordance with your rear roll center being lower than the front, that's going to make it want to have that weight transfer more to the rear. So basically, that just determines your weight transfer bias. Usually, what I have setting on the front end is a roll center that is very similar to the standard 03/MRX chassis. It's just I lowered a little bit, so it's a little bit higher. But so you can shim underneath those screws, the top screws for your front suspension, and you'll be lowering your roll center. Yeah, I know it sounds kind of weird that you raise the upper bar, but you lower the roll center. But that's basically what will happen. Um, okay, and then so lost my train of thought. Yeah, uh, lower your front roll center, raise your rear roll center. You're gonna have more chassis, more weight transfer on your chassis to the front. Speaking of weight distribution slash weight on your chassis, there are uh, two balancing holes on both your center chassis, your main chassis, and your rear pod. Now, You don't see them in these pictures because they're covered up on the bottom. However, they're there. They're a little bit larger. They're 440 imperial screw size. And basically, what you're gonna do, you're gonna take your little what's it called, pins, your balance pins, if you have them. You're gonna put them underneath there, and you're gonna put all your components down, and you're gonna balance your chassis. And it's critical if you're balancing your chassis to balance your center chassis and your rear pod separately, because they do both transfer weights separately, and you're gonna mainly want to focus on your main chassis. I've tried balancing the rear chassis a little bit. Didn't really notice a difference when I tried it. I had about 2 or 3 grams, but not a big deal. Uh, I wouldn't say that's necessary. And also, you just saw in the previous picture, you just mount out all your tri shocks and all the good stuff. So here's your servo. This is the DS, the Corona DS 919MG. So great servo from Hobby King, about $8. I bought a couple of these, and comes with the right servo horn, so you should be good to go. You can see I marked with a Sharpie where I'm going to cut. Okay, and you're going to want to cut out this servo horn so that you just see that top part of the where within that cut line. You just want that to be there. You can get rid of the rest of it. You don't need it. Um, and you'll see what I mean in the next picture. Okay, so you see I've cut it. Yeah, this is straight after cutting it with the Dremel, so obviously, hit it with some sandpaper to make it look nice. Afterwards, start with probably 800, go to maybe 1500. But yeah, you're gonna want to use the top holes. So there's the bottom three, which are closer together, and the top three, which are farther apart. You're gonna want to use the outermost, not the center one. You're gonna ignore the center one. You're just gonna use the one on the left and the right, and basically that's where you're gonna mount your linkages, your steering linkages, which I mentioned before, but I'll mention again. To get about I don't know, half degree to 1 degree of toe in, I'd start with 18.5 millimeters on each link, and then as you decrease the distance between your front steering linkages, you're going to increase your toe out, and as you increase the length of your front steering linkages, you're going to create more toe in. So yeah, start with 18.5, maybe go 18.25 to get like dead zero, or 18.33, somewhere around there, and to get dead zero. And then if you want toe out, somewhere less than that will get you where you want to go. Okay. And also just remember that you're measuring your steering linkages from the center of the pivot ball within the steering linkages to the other center of the other pivot ball on the other side. Okay. So you can also see in the previous picture I had those mounting points. You're going to want to shave those off with a Dremel. If you don't have a Dremel, take some scissors or clippers, or even maybe with this plastic is kind of weak, so maybe you can even do it with your hand. Rip them off. Take some 600, 200, or 150 grit sandpaper and just sand it down nice and flush. And the one drawback of this 919 servo is it's kind of long. I wouldn't recommend using this unless you're going to be using a Kyosho board, and I will post a tutorial about that a little bit later, as I will be doing that myself, because when you do that, you can take off that rear section of the servo and save a little bit of space. You'd want to do that because, as you can see, the Ackerman is not quite right with the length of that servo. I'm currently working on a fix for that, but basically, you can just take some shims, use a little bit longer screws, and shim back the steering linkages where they mount to that servo horn. And you're going to also remember you're going to want to mount those linkages on the back side of that servo horn, so facing towards the servo, not on the outside of it. So yep, and just shim those back. Put a couple shims in there, maybe 1 or 2 millimeters, and you wouldn't even need to worry about the space issue with the servo, or the length issue, I should say, and you'll be fine doing that. Okay, so what you're going to do when you're ready with all that, you're going to mount your all your electronics, your ESC, your receiver, your motor, and then you're going to turn your receiver on, and you're going to put that servo to dead center, put some servo tape on the bottom, and then just stick it down to get that steering center. That's all you're going to do. And we're going to have an electronics install later on. I just wanted to show you what this would look like. and that's that. So just remember, guys, that included in the kit is only the black stuff from Shapeways, some hardware, and the chassis itself. I did have to do some shaving of the chassis with some sandpaper just to smooth everything out because it came off the CNC a little rough. But anyways, thanks for watching. Good luck with your build.